The bipartisan infrastructure deal allocated $7.5 billion for alternative vehicle fueling infrastructure, charging infrastructure, which would create about 600,000 charging stations across the country. But is that enough for the U.S. to transition to electric vehicle use? With us to discuss is the former chief economist for Ford Motor Company and current senior fellow for the Third Way Climate and Energy Program, Hughes-Cromwick. Ellen, thanks very much for joining us. It's not a lot of money in the grand scheme of things, but the U.S., I think, has already gone pretty far, thanks to Tesla for the most part, in terms of putting charging stations across the country. Is this going to be enough to get consumers to really make the leap? You know, here in Europe, I know from firsthand experience, there aren't nearly enough charging stations. They're all very slow and terribly painful to use. Is it going to be different in the U.S. post this spending?
We desperately need to start building out the infrastructure way more than we have right now, Matt. As you know, we have about 100,000 chargers in the U.S. right now, but the president has now identified a goal of 50% EVs by 2030. And that means we have to step up with some nudges from federal funding. You mentioned $7.5 billion in the infrastructure deal. Actually, $5 billion of that $7.5 is allocated to EV charging, and then possibly some of that incremental $2.5 billion. Bottom line, we have much more to go here. We've got to get competitive and really think about jobs in the nenext generation.
Now, you know, I often talk to the CEOs of big oil companies, BP, Royal Dutch Shell, et cetera. And I always ask them, why don't you just immediately put electric charging stations at all of your filling stations? That would be, I feel like, pretty easy and relatively inexpensive with a great return. Why don't you think that the gas filling stations are really switching over quickly enough?
Well, what I've seen in equity reports and other places, a lot of research that's been done, the margins on charging stations are relatively thin, and a lot of the gasoline dealerships are saying, hey, I'm not going to make money on that. Why should I be all in? And that's precisely, unfortunately, why, they should be all in, because once we get the federal funding going, we'll get more of a tailwind, better scale economies. This is Econ 101, and then better profitability over time. Frankly, we can't be looking in the rearview mirror when it comes to infrastructure. We have to look ahead. We have to invest right now when interest rates are low. And when developers and other real estate, businesses start to see the government supporting this, they will jump in much faster. So it's really kind of an economics piece. Need jobs. The jobs are part of our future. We got to do this for the next generation.
Are we going to see industry standardization, Ellen? Because from my experience, there are a number of different systems. None of them is terribly easy to use, and they all work at very different speeds as well. Are we going to see something that's simple so that American consumers can use it?
Yeah, I think over time we're going to see much more standardization, and even Tesla has made a statement that they want to make their superchargers accessible. And we're seeing, technology advance. Frankly, we're seeing increases in throughput from, the kilowatt flow in a DC fast charger. And we're seeing other advances that I think are going to make it much more easier for vehicle owners to just step up with their app, plug in, and they're on their way. So this is really a chance for us to kind of get ahead here. We've got to get competitive. And the first step really is getting your infrastructure out there so people can begin to use it better.
All right, Ellen, great talking. I hope we can get you back soon. Ellen Hughes-Cromwick of the Third Way Climate and Energy Program. Thanks for joining us. Now,